All right, gents, welcome back to Cooking with Doc. We're going to do a kind of a dessert today. We've done a lot of savory things on the channel, so we'll do a dessert today. This dessert is kind of like an apple pastry. It's called an apple galette or an apple tart. We're going to kind of do it free form in case you don't have a tart pan, but there's a couple different ways of doing this. So first off, we're going to start with the crust or the pastry filling. The great thing with this recipe is your measurements don't have to be precise. We're going to start with like about a cup of flour, and then we're going to add 3/4 of a stick of butter. So that might seem like a lot of butter, but that's how you make really good pastry. And the key is the butter needs to be cold. If the butter's not cold, it will just run out once you put everything in the oven, and your pastry will not be flaky. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna cut this up into pieces, and we're gonna dump it in our flour, right? And we want kind of small pieces because we're gonna work this in by hand. So I'm cutting this up a little bit at a time. This is the start of something. It's known as a pâté brise. That's the official French name of this kind of pastry. You could do a lot with it. I use this exact same pastry recipe to make my chicken pot pie. I make this exact same pastry recipe to make like a quiche, right? With eggs. And it's pretty easy to do. So I put my butter and my flour. I'm also adding, like 1/8 of a cup of sugar and just a pinch of salt. Salt brings out the flavor. It's a sweet dish, so we want a little sugar in the dough. And what we're going to do is we're going to use just the tips of our fingers to break the butter up. We don't want to use the palms of our hands or anything like that. We don't want to add too much warmth to this butter. We want to try to stay as cold as possible, so we also got to work really fast. So all I'm doing is I'm going in there and I'm pinching. I'm squeezing and I'm pinching the butter to break it up into the flour. You could also do this with a food processor. Will work, but I didn't feel like cleaning mine. But the same idea works. So you just go in there and you're breaking your butter up. You want to make sure there's no big lumps of butter, and you want to make sure that all your butter is kind of completely covered in flour. So you don't want your any kind of butter to be on its own. You're trying to break it up so it just has flour sticking to it. And that would also do is that a lot of the flour will then be kind of moisturized by the butter. And the texture we're looking for kind of won't be that different from what we started with, right? It might be a little, you'll see kind of the shapes the butter makes, but it won't be like a full dough yet, right? And we're getting there. We're starting to get there. You might be able to see a little bit of a difference. I'm not really sure, but it's a little. That butter's broken in there, and we really want this butter, kind of the classic cookbooks say, like pea-sized, right? So we want this butter to be kind of uniformly broken up into the size of peas, and we're just about there. I don't see any really big pieces. Maybe 1 or 2 big pieces left. I'll go get those, but everything is broken up, and the consistency is kind of that of like sand at the beach. Right, so you can feel there's like a little moisture in there. But it's definitely not holding together as a dough yet. And to do that, I'm going to add 1/3 of a cup of cold water. Water needs to be cold. We want to try to keep everything as cold as we can. Some recipes will call for actual ice water. I find no difference using cold water from the tap. And I'll kind of work that water in with my fingers until it starts to come together. Right, until we get a little a ball of dough. which we have now. Now I add maybe a little too much water. It's pretty sticky. So I'm going to come and I'll just add a little more flour. This isn't like particularly precise. It's more of kind of a feeling. So I added just another sprinkling of flour to mix into my dough, and I'll dry it out a little bit. Okay. Use it. Let me kind of scrape my hands off, and there we go. Right. So we have now essentially just a ball of dough. I'm going to get some more flour for my surface, and we're gonna roll it out a bit. Right, this is going to be the casing for my tart. We need to roll it out a bit. I'm just washing my hands off, so when I touch stuff in the kitchen, I don't get dough all over it, and then I don't get Mrs. Doc angry at me for leaving dough all over the kitchen. So I'll dump my ball of dough out into my flour. It's still a little wet, so I added a little extra flour to my tray. And we'll just kind of work it around, work it into the flour, and kind of try to flatten it out a bit. And we really want to use kind of the palm of our hand at this step, because what that does is actually it smooths the butter out a little bit. I'm getting flour all over the place. Once we do that, we can kind of start to roll this out a bit. And we're looking, I don't know, maybe 12-inch round. I like to kind of pick it up, put it down, flip it over a little bit. Again, nothing needs to be too precise. There's a little hole forming here, not a big deal. We can patch that later. But we're kind of at, almost a good size. We'll go a little bigger. And now you want to make sure, one thing a lot of people mess up when they roll out dough is that their edges are a little too thick. So go around, just kind of feel the edges of your dough. Make sure it's the same as the rest of your dough. And I want to transfer this to this baking tray that I got tin foil on. So one way to do that is you kind of put your rolling pin 3/4 of the way through, and you roll it back up on the rolling pin. And that'll let you pick it up easily. And then I'm just going to drop it on my tin foil, which is where we'll end up assembling our tart. I will move my flour tray. This is just going to sit off to the side for a little bit while I prepare my apples. The amount of apples you need really depends on the size of your apples. I would guess this is kind of like a pound of apples. The only reason I know that is because I have a 5-pound bag, and this seems like a 1/5 of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to peel them, I'm going to slice them, and we'll arrange them in our tart pan. Let me get the flour off my hands, and maybe some of the flour off the cutting board here, just so we're working clean. Now we'll go about peeling them. So how do you peel an apple? So you could do it just with a paring knife, or with a paring knife and a peeler. What I'm going to do, this is why I say you need a paring knife. You have the stem end, and this end that you're going to want to take out. So the way I do that with a paring knife is I will actually use my thumb to prevent the knife from going through the apple, and I will put the knife in the apple and just twist, and that will take the stem end out. The stem is still there, but we can get that later. And then we'll also take this end out, same idea, and we'll twist. Sometimes you take a little more, sometimes you take a little less, and then after that we'll peel our apple. When peeling, it's best to kind of go around, and you turn the apple, not the knife, or the peel in this case, or the peeler. So I'm just going around my apple, and bit by bit, taking the peel off until it's all peeled. some applications with apples, you don't have to peel your apple, but quite often when you bake an apple with the peel on, the peel gets kind of mushy. I don't really like the way it tastes, so I like to always peel my apples when I'm going to bake with them. Unless I'm making with a baked apple dish, which is where you kind of core out the middle of the apple and stuff it. Then you want the peel to kind of have it help keep its shape. All right, so here we got one apple down, 2 to go. So we'll keep going. We'll take the stem end out. Again, the stem didn't come out. That's okay. We'll get that in a little bit. We'll take the other end out, and we'll peel our apple. You might have noticed on the channel, I sound like a YouTuber, hooray. We have a lot of savory dishes and not a ton of kind of sweet dishes. And like most baking things take a little bit of time. So that's why I do it, because I'm not the best video editor. I'm getting a little better, so I thought this might be a good opportunity to give you something a little savory, which is actually really easy to make. Based on what I see when I walk around the lunchroom, most of you guys have apples at home. So this is probably something you could actually make. You could also make this with other fruit. I've done it with peaches in the summer, which were actually delicious. I've done it with plums. I've done it with berries. Really kind of any fruit that will hold its shape when baked, to some extent, will be really good in this. So we're going to keep going. I'm going to keep peeling. Strawberry's actually really nice in this as well. Do like kind of a mixed berry thing. We'll keep peeling, and of course this would be best in the fall when apples are like at their best. But I find that actually baking apples makes them, it's kind of like an equalizer, right? So like, of course, really super fresh, delicious apples when baked will be better. But like apples out of season, which are still pretty plentiful at the supermarkets, still taste pretty good when baked. So peeled those 3, we'll cut them in half. And then we have this bit in the middle that we got to take out, the core. The way I like to do that is some people do the same thing I did with either end. I like just to kind of cut a wedge out right around the core. If you got really big apples, sometimes you'll lose some of the flesh of the apple that's edible while doing it this way. But, so you would use a different technique. But since these are pretty small, we'll just take the cores out this way. And once we do that, we could talk about how we want to slice these. So the question is, I guess, how decorated you want this thing to look. I like to try to make my desserts as pretty as possible. I fail spectacularly when I do it, but I try. So here's how we could go about doing that. Got my apples here. I'm going to kind of clean up a little bit. I'll bring my dough closer. And now when you bake fruit, there is it does release some moisture, which can make your finished product a little soggy. So one way to kind of fix that trick is right here. I got some flour and some sugar kind of mixed. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to sprinkle that across the bottom. So the flour, just not across the whole lot. We're going to use kind of the edges to make a lip. So you don't want to go across the whole of the dough. If you just kind of go across the outside and the middle, the flour will help collect some of the extra moisture, and the sugar will add some flavor. And then what we want to do is we should cut this into slices. So how am I going to cut this into slices? I'm going to go, so this was the bottom, this was the top of the apple. I'm just going to go that way, right? So I'm going to cut this into slices. And the slices that fall apart like that, we'll use for something. And the slices that stay together, we're going to use to kind of as a decoration. So here's a bunch that stayed together. Actually, that one fell apart. That's good. We want some of that. And then kind of this end bit we'll cut into little chunks. So we'll slice again. We'll slice again. And this end bit we'll cut into little chunks. All right, and maybe this bit, that's a little small, so that'll be in my little chunk bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to use these kind of parts at the end to fill in the bottom of the tart. So every tart has a bunch of apple in it. And we'll use these other parts to kind of decorate and make sure it looks pretty. So I'm just slicing this up into wedges. Actually, those goes with those. Those goes with those. That's good English, Doc. Let's cut this into wedges. So we're just kind of saving all the wedges to one side, all the chunks to the other side. And it's not really precise, and that's okay. And I'm just going to grab all my little chunks and just cut them into small pieces. Right? This is super imprecise. And once I kind of got that cut into small pieces, that'll form the base of my tart. So I'm just going to spread this across the bottom. I got a seed in there. Get rid of that. I'll spread that across the bottom, and it'll form the base. It'll take care of any kind of fill in some gaps when I put the decoration on. And then with this decoration, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can go in rows, or maybe you can go in like a kind of a flower shape. I'm going to try the flower one. I'm not very good at this, but I'll move a little closer to you. And how you do it is you just kind of start from the middle and go out in concentric circles, tucking one underneath the other. So we'll see if we can make that happen. We'll go underneath here, right? With the kind of the center of it all being the tallest, and as we move out, getting kind of shorter and shorter. And of course, this is falling apart because I'm not very good at this. But here we go. Continually falling off. We got a little more here. There we go. We'll come underneath. We're just trying to make this look like a rose. Unfortunately, this looks like more of a mess than a rose. But just it's amazing what like some little bit of intentionality does for the look of the dish. So we're just kind of being intentional in where we place these. Then we have all our apples there. Okay. Now what do we have to do? We're going to use the dough around the outside just to make a lip, right? To kind of hold everything in, just to make a little lip to hold everything in. And, it's falling apart a little bit, right? Right, we want to make a lip, make some creases so nothing falls out. And then there's a way to finish this. Missed a few apples here, that's okay. It's a snack. There's a way to finish this. We're going to take the rest of the stick of butter. We use 3/4 of it. We use the rest of the stick. Just as put little bits of butter across the top here. And what that'll do is it's baking. It'll kind of go down into the tart and add some moisture, but also add a little fat, which creates browning and all kinds of good stuff. So I'm doing that, and I'm putting little pieces around the outside of the dough as well to allow us, again, some of that browning. And after we do that, there's one more thing we do to finish it off. After we get butter all over our hands, is add a little sugar to the top. And when we add the sugar, and I'm going to add maybe like, you know, a third of a cup or something like that. And nothing here is super precise. We want to make sure we get some on the apples, but we also want to make sure we get a bunch on the dough itself. And you see what I'm doing here with my hand is making sure it doesn't go too much off the dough, because that'll actually make the whole thing stick. So that was way less than what I said. That was maybe like 3 tablespoons of sugar. And now we bake this, say 400 degrees, checking on it after 40 minutes. It might be done a little later than that. But between 40 and 50 minutes, this should be cooked. The dough will be brown, and the apples will be cooked through. So I'll see you when this whole thing is done. All right, so we're back. My tart took like 44 minutes to cook. I'm going to take it out of the oven now. We'll have a peek at what it looks like when it's done. I don't know how well you can see it. There's some browning on the crust of the pastry, a little bit on top of the apple, and you know, it's pretty good. If you see like kind of this burnt bit over here, that's sugar. That's why I said you want to try to keep as much of the sugar as you can on top of the tart. With a pan this hot, this will keep cooking underneath, and we want to make sure that doesn't happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 spatulas, and I'm just going to get this off the pan. And we can kind of get it on. So I have a cutting board over here. And to take a peek at what this looks like when it's all finished. Now this is hot. You don't want to eat this hot out of the oven. I don't know if you can see. Let me see if I can move the camera a little bit. There's liquid in there from the apples and from the butter. We kind of want to let that chill out a little bit. It will burn you, and that's not great. But here is Doc's apple tart or apple galette. I hope you make it.